Now, if you rise above thinking, it doesn't mean you'll never think again, but it means you're no longer in the grip of thinking. And most importantly, you no longer derive your sense of identity, your sense of who you are, from thought, the narrative of you, your life, me and my life. So where does your sense of identity then come from? Where does it arise? Let's do another little experiment. For a moment, let's say there is no past and future. You might have noticed I said, let's say or assume there is no past and future. The truth is there is no past or future, but I don't want to go that far. You might not believe me anymore. Let's assume that right now, in this moment, that you don't have a past and you don't have a future. You're just here. You're perceiving everything, but you don't remember your name. Well, you didn't remember it until this moment when I mentioned it. And you don't remember the stuff that happened in your past. But we don't need it right now. You know, if you need to go there, you can retrieve the files, the memory files. And let's say for a moment that you don't have a future, or that the future doesn't exist, or that you're going to die in 5 minutes. Oh my God. Okay, you don't have a future, and you don't have a past. You don't remember your email address or your name or your problems right now, because right now you're just here, perceiving. You're perceiving. What or who are you when you don't remember your past and think about your future, and there's just this left, just this. In fact, there's nothing to think about right now. You don't need to think. And yet, what's left of you when you're not thinking, when you're just here? Now, you cannot name it. There's only a sense, a strange sense of beingness or presence. And that is most essentially you. That is a deep I. That is more truly you than any memory, because you're not your memories. That is more truly you than the historical person. But what is that? That strange sense of there's a presence there, there is a beingness, but it doesn't have any content. There's just a space, there's just a still space. To the mind, it's insignificant. It says, okay, that's enough. I have too many problems to think about. I don't want to go there now. I don't have time. Maybe when I feel a little better, when I've solved my problems, then I can do this. No, you will never solve your problems. If you solve 2 problems, 3 more will creep up behind you. That's how life is. It's not meant to be free of challenges. It's meant to awaken you. And this is the possibility of awakening, is to realize this beingness. Now, beingness comes from the verb to be the most fundamental thing, to be. Now, what's the first person singular of to be? It is not I be. Strangely, you say I am. I am. Now, all you know when you're not thinking is that you are. That's beyond doubt. You can sense the presence that you are. And that is the realization of yourself, not as a person or as a form identity, but the realization of yourself as consciousness. in essence, who or what you are is consciousness, and it's not yours. You're a manifestation of universal, because only one consciousness that manifests in countless forms briefly. And if you can go there and be rooted in that and realize that is who you are beyond form. The analogy that works quite well that I usually use for this is if you imagine yourself to be a ripple on the surface of the ocean. Let's say every human being here is a ripple on the surface of the ocean. Now, ripples are short-lived, but so are humans. A little bit longer than a ripple, but from a more universal perspective, a human life is a brief thing. It's a flicker, goes, birth, old age, and death. So everywhere on the planet there are these flickers of consciousness, but it's the same consciousness continuously manifesting form. I am is the word. All you can say is I am, but you don't add anything, not this or that. I am. In the Old Testament, God is asked, who are you? And that's perhaps the most profound sentence in the Old Testament is, I am that I am, where God defines him, her, itself as the I am, as the essence identity of all forms. And also another beautiful sentence in the Old Testament, as you know, the Old Testament is a mixed, the New Testament, the Bible is a mixed bag of fantastic things and other things. But I like to look for the jewels that are there. Another beautiful statement that points to all this is, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Now these words are all synonymous. Be refers to being. Still is the state of consciousness without thought, stillness. Being and stillness, the same thing. And know, there is a deep knowing in that. In fact, that is because that is the source of all intelligence. There's a deep knowing, but from the point of view of the conceptual mind, it looks like unknowing. It looks like ignorance, because it's not knowing through concepts anymore. There's a deeper knowing, and this is where what we call wisdom arises, which is very different from intelligence, the IQ kind of intelligence. The wisdom that the world needs, not more intelligence, please, no, but wisdom that, yes, be still and know that I am. It is the I am of the I am of being God. Oh, here we come to a difficult word, but they're all synonymous. What is God then? I rarely talk about God because you can't really, it's so transcendent that whatever you say would be very limited. As you know, human language and human thought is relatively limited.
I know you work with psychotherapists and therapists in helping others, and my question is how can we follow up on the analogy of the caterpillar? How can we support others? How can we know if they are there, if they are not there? Is it possible to help? I don't know what the question is, but it's can we support someone in this process? You obviously are, and Kim is obviously supporting us. So
yes,
is there different stages that we can support different people in different processes?
The moment the spiritual awakening, if we want to call it that, happens in you, which is the disidentification from the thinking mind and certain degree of arising of presence. Well, not the moment it happens, but a little bit after that, as this process continues, many people find that more and more people you meet people, sometimes seemingly accidentally, or it might be people who you know already, who need you, who also are at a stage of readiness but don't know it yet. And you may find and will find that these people are drawn to you. You may not immediately recognize them. In fact, you may think, listen, this person is not going to awaken in this lifetime. But you can get big surprises. Sometimes the most unlikely people can come to you, and you know that it's happening. There's a moment usually when you notice there is a transmission either of presence as an energy field, or they ask you a question, you give an answer, and the answer has a certain power or aliveness to it. It comes through you spontaneously, because the question was a genuine question and there was an opening in the other person. If it's not a genuine question, if it's a question asked out of curiosity, what's that spiritual stuff all about that you do, or whatever, or tell me about that spirit stuff, but there's no real opening, then your answer will not be good, or there may be no answer. But if it's a real question, and there's some degree of presence in you, then there will be a real answer. And that's the helping then comes in two ways. One is through the energy that you emanate as you are present. The second is through what you say to them. And that is the beginning of you becoming a spiritual teacher. And many of you, some of you are already spiritual teachers, whether formally or not formally. Some of you will become formal spiritual teachers because the world is in great need of you. Humans want you, they may not know it yet, but everybody, even if you do not become a formal spiritual teacher, you will do some teaching informally through everybody you meet, because you spread, your state of consciousness spreads to others. That applies both to unconscious people who spread their negativity or the viral infection of their minds, and to present people who spread presence. And it's not that you are doing it. So an important obstacle could be if you think that you need to do something to help them. This is very seductive because it's a wonderful thing to help others. But the obstacle is you think that it is up to you to help them. It's not. In fact, you wouldn't know how to, I wouldn't know how to. So you have to allow it to happen by holding the presence, especially when somebody comes to you, asks a question, or you say something. Hold the presence and then see what happens. So it's not you who is doing it. Sometimes I've met some people who said they've been asked to, first they saw some individuals, help them, they are growing and growing in presence, and then somebody approached and said, can you give a talk to our little group? And then they came to me and said, I don't think I'm ready to give a talk to a group. Somebody asked me to give a talk to a group. I think I'm not ready. And I said, if you think you're ready, then that's not a good sign. Because there's probably a little ego in there that thinks, I'm ready to be a spiritual teacher. Just come to me and I will heal you. But if you feel that the most powerful place, whether you are with one person or with a group of people, the most powerful place is to not know. But you have to be comfortable with not knowing. If you're uncomfortable with not knowing what to say, what to do, then you go, oh dear, what am I to say? The mind says, quick, say something useful to this person. And then you think things you've read in a book. Well, Eckhart says that it doesn't mean you should never quote, but it's always more powerful if it comes from you. So it only comes if you are comfortable with, enter that space of not knowing, which is basically you surrender thought, and you just look at the person, and you listen, and then see what answer comes, then see what you say, if anything. In some cases you might not say anything. So the help allow it to move through you, and that's a big relief. It means you don't have to do it. You only become a vehicle for it, an opening for it. You become an opening for consciousness. So you don't have to heal people, help people. I mean, you can help physically, that's a different matter. You can give somebody food or money to help. But at a deeper level, you can't do anything. So getting out of the way, and then it will happen through you. In the Course in Miracles, it says the moment you become a student of the Course in Miracles, which, by the way, is a lovely teaching, but not for everybody. So don't believe that because I mention it now, you have to go and get it. It's great for some people. It's a beautiful spiritual work. But for others, it's not the right one. Nothing is right for everybody. Course in Miracles, however, says the moment you start studying the Course in Miracles, which really implies the moment you begin to disidentify from the conditioned mind, you become a teacher of God. Now, the ego, of course, would probably love that term. That is why I personally would not use it. But there is some truth in it. It's not a terminology that I would use, but the moment the presence arises, you begin to teach presence. But really, presence does it through you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's a welcoming the challenges, we talked about it before, welcoming the challenges of everyday life. Without that, first you wouldn't get a reflection of where you are at as far as your state of consciousness is concerned. How upset do situations, how much power do situations and other people have over you and over your state of consciousness? How often do you get upset, irritated, reactive, and so on? That's a good reflection of how present you are. Not, although meditation is a wonderful device, a wonderful tool, but how deep you can go when you meditate is only a small part of the transformation of consciousness. You can't really tell your state of consciousness unless you go into normal life and then get reflections of yourself there. Human beings, it's not the case that humans either have an ego or are totally free of ego. The ego manifests in human beings in varying degrees. Most humans have a lot of ego that determines their thought processes and their emotions, but a little bit of awareness also in between. They may still be capable of empathy, sometimes with a limited number of people, perhaps only empathy with your family members or empathy with the people who belong to your particular group, your collective. And when you look at, you can understand the ego more deeply if you look at the extreme manifestations of ego that a certain percentage of humanity suffer from, where it's actually labeled as a mental disorder. Then you see that many mental disorders are actually just a more extreme form of what is the normal egoic state. And when you see the normal egoic state in a more extreme manifestation, then you can recognize it also when it appears as a normal state. An example of that is paranoia. Paranoia is the belief that there are people who are plotting against you, enemies who have spent most of their life following you or plotting against you. So it's a delusional system that is the result of the egoic state of fear on the one hand, because there's always fear in the background when you live through a false sense of self. And so the mind tries to explain the fear, and then it creates a story, and then you believe in the story. Secondly, another reason why the mind creates paranoia is to give itself a heightened sense of significance. I am so important, is the implication, that the CIA has 55 people whose full-time job is to try to control me. Now, I'm not saying that CIA I'm not saying they don't do things. They do sometimes, as you know. But I don't think they have 55 people, or even one in my case, that try to, who knows, I may be wrong. If you work for the CIA, please raise your hand. But you can see, if that is the story that your mind believes in, how important you suddenly feel. So sometimes paranoia arises because the ego's need to enhance its sense of existence, its sense of significance, its sense of importance. And if life doesn't tell you that you are important, then you have to create a story that you are important. And paranoia is one way of creating a story that gives yourself importance. There are slightly less extreme forms of that are people who believe, for example, believe they are great geniuses, but they are so superior to everything that they never even try to create or do anything, because that's beneath them. So you can have, occasionally I've met people who tell me, oh, I'm a spiritual teacher too. They tell me, oh, I see, that's great. Have you written anything? Or, no, I don't write this. The true teachings are all beyond words. I don't bother with that. Oh, that's fine. They may. So, but that gives you a sense of you are actually superior to most people, all these insignificant people who are so, in their insignificance, they have to write books. Many stories that one creates to give oneself a sense of importance, stories that have, in the more extreme cases, little relationship with external reality. And then there is talking about Narcissus, there's another extreme form of ego, that when you look at it, you can see that it has all the elements of the normal ego, but greatly emphasized, and that's called narcissistic personality disorder. And people who suffer from that are totally obsessed with themselves, with their appearance, and the way they are perceived by others. They live for that. They are totally incapable of empathy. In fact, they're hardly aware that other humans exist. They only see other humans through how they can help, how they can amplify their own ego. So what they want from other humans is attention, or other forms of so-called narcissistic supply. They are always looking to enhance their self-image through being told that they are awesome, they are wonderful. They believe they know everything. The moment you question their opinion about something, they will become very angry and aggressive. You see quite a few of them on Facebook. But there's still a human being underneath that dysfunction. It's just an extreme form of ego. Nobody knows how many people suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, but the estimate is 3 to 5% of the population. Now that means 3 to 5% of the population suffer from this very extreme form of ego. And perhaps you've all met somebody who can think of somebody to, oh, I wonder if that was my dad, or that was my that was my ex-husband, my ex-wife. Hopefully not your present husband or wife. So continuous vigilance, so that you are there in the background as the awareness. When you become aware of your ego operating, it's not really ego anymore. The real ego exists in complete unconsciousness, in complete identification. When you notice something in you that's egoic, with the need to be right, the need to be superior to somebody, whatever it may be, then by noticing it, that means you are there as the observer, the awareness. So, strictly speaking, it's not even ego anymore. Once you notice your ego, what you're noticing is a deep-seated pattern in you. And it's only really ego if you're completely identified with it and there's no awareness whatsoever. But the consciousness is not form. And what we perceive as space, can we even say that space exists? Well, not really. It makes existence possible, but it doesn't exist as such because space is not anything. It's a total mystery. We can look into outer space at night, clear sky, and then you look and there's the vastness of space, and what is awe-inspiring when you look out at night and the sky is clear. Yes, it's incredible to see the thousands of stars that you can see with your naked eye, the faint luminous band of our own galaxy, the Milky Way, it goes along there, exists in total, absolute stillness. Those were my first meditations when I was 15, looking up. I didn't know it was a meditation because it stopped my mind briefly. The most awe-inspiring thing is not so much the infinite, almost infinite number of celestial bodies. I mean, most of this, what we call stars, are suns, with the exception of the few planets that are part of our solar system. Most of these so-called stars are suns, and the luminous band of the Milky Way is millions of suns, creating just the luminosity. You can't distinguish individual suns. But that's not the most awe-inspiring thing about when looking up into. The most awe-inspiring thing is the vastness and the absolute stillness of it, and the vastness of space. Oh, you can't even start thinking about it. It's totally impossible to grasp. And yet, what is that? Nobody knows actually what it is. Space. It doesn't exist, because exist means it manifests, it stands out. As I mentioned before, ex means out, exist, to stand out. Space enables things to exist. The important thing is the inner space is just as vast as the outer space, but it does not have an extension in this dimension. And that is the inner space of consciousness. And perhaps the outer space is an externalization of what we call consciousness. It enables everything to be, is not subject to time. So when you sit in a room, let's go back to the room, you become aware of the content of the room, and then you become aware of the space of the room. That's the essence. If you were asking the room, let's imagine for a moment the room is a living entity, if you ask the room, can you describe yourself? Can you find out about what you are, then well, I am. The furniture, the content makes up the room, and the ceiling, and whatever the room contains. The room would describe itself through the content and through the boundaries, ceiling, floor, walls, chairs, tables, lamps. And is that all? You can ask the room, and then the room would say, yeah, I think so. I've looked at everything, and that's who I am. That's what I am. And then you say, well, you might have overlooked something, and that's the space, which is the essence of the room. Otherwise, there would be nothing, wouldn't be a room. So if the room became aware of its own essence as space, that would be an awakening. Now, the analogy, of course, the room is you. And if I asked you to describe yourself, you would normally begin by describing yourself in terms of the content of your mind, or the content of your mind, memories, concepts, thoughts, emotions, your past, all the stuff that makes up your personality. That's all the content of your mind. And that's how people usually perceive themselves. They perceive themselves as the content. They are the content of their mind. And they are unaware of the essence of who they are, which is not content, which is beyond content. That's the space of consciousness. And so this is like the room. And then you ask, haven't you overlooked something? You talked about yourself in terms of content. Who are you? And then you have to think, okay, I forgot something. The presence that makes it all possible. And that's an immediate realization. You can't understand it. You can only be it. And you are it. You cannot realize it except when there's a gap in the stream of thinking, even if it's short, like now. Thinking subsides for a moment, and it doesn't subside because you're falling asleep. That could happen too. But thinking subsides and alertness remains. And then the miracle happens inside you, which is the next step in the evolution of human consciousness, and that's connected to planetary consciousness. The next step is the transcendence of thinking. Transcendence means that you don't think anymore. It means you realize something that's beyond thinking. It includes thinking, but it's beyond it. That's inseparable from who you are. It's vaster, much vaster than thinking. And then thinking still continues to fulfill an important function, but a different function from before. It's no longer self-serving. Self-serving thinking is egoic thinking. It's no longer compulsive, and it's no longer addictive. It no longer gives you the foundation for your sense of who you are. It's simply a wonderful tool for creating, a wonderful, extremely powerful tool for manifesting and creating and giving form to things, participating consciously in the act of creation that the universe is engaged in. So it's a wonderful thing, but unless you have transcended thinking, you are at the mercy of thinking. And in fact, even to say, I think would be a lie if you haven't transcended thinking, Because if you say, I think, it implies that there's some kind of volition, but there isn't. Because if you're completely unconscious, if there's zero awareness in you, thinking happens to you. You don't do it, it's being done to you. Thoughts appear in your mind and you can't help it. The types of thoughts that appear in your mind depend on the way your mind has been conditioned. So depending what part of the planet you come from or what kind of background you had when you were growing up, that determines the type of your conditioning. Doesn't matter what the type of your conditioning is, the fundamental fact remains. Your thinking, in the absence of awareness, is totally conditioned, and it is an involuntary process. And there are still millions of humans on the planet, billions probably, who are at the mercy of their thought processes, which are totally determined by the conditioning of their mind, their personal and cultural, etc., background where they grew up. And so they think, they do things, they think things, and they think it's them. It's the thought processes inside them being at work. So they're not thinking, they are being thought by thought. Thought thinks you up as an entity, a kind of mind-made entity. No drifting off into thinking. That's the Zen master speaking, without the stick. Awareness. If thoughts arise, don't get involved in them. Just let them drift past. Drift in and out of awareness. Be the sky, not the thoughts, not the clouds. You're the sky. Occasional cloud doesn't matter. You are the space. You, you may encounter boredom sometimes in meditation, because meditation is not interesting. So you encounter a little barrier inside this, and then you surrender to that, and you go beyond boredom. Impulses may come. You want to get up, start thinking about something. And you observe that. And then it arises and passes away. Many things in meditation you can practice. The arising of feeling or a thought or some impulse. You can watch it. And if you don't have a reactive relationship towards it, you don't give it excessive importance, it subsides again. And then you're left with just you as spacious awareness. And then the next thing comes. And you're still there as spacious awareness, even though the thought has come in. And then it subsides. And then the body gets restless. And then the mind says, I need to get up, I can't carry on sitting here. And then you watch that. You watch the restlessness. Everything is allowed in the present moment. Any external disturbance immediately becomes part of your meditation. There's never anything outside, unless you're physically attacked by a mountain lion. There's never anything outside that can actually disturb your meditation, even a big what they call in England pneumatic drill. I can't remember what it's called here. But same thing. It starts up next door. Imagine. And you say, I can't meditate in conditions like this. But the surprising thing is, you don't need ideal conditions for meditation. In other words, every condition is ideal for meditation. If you totally accept the so-called disturbance, you surrender. It becomes part of the meditation. You have transcended. If you want to overcome the pneumatic drill, you have to run out there and say, stop that. Then you have either overcome it or you are in an argument. Transcendence is meditation. Whatever arises. And that then becomes the way in which you live your life. That you never oppose anything. Anything that comes in, you go, oh. And then you go with it, around it. You don't oppose it, it's accepted. The present moment is accepted. So, and you can practice that during your meditation. When things go wrong, little things like last Sunday, or bigger things, It's always a good test for your degree of presence. So it gives you a reflection of how present you are or how non-present you are when something goes wrong. Is there, so you can look back, it might be the case with you, maybe not. If you look back to last Sunday, was there a reaction of whatever kind against what is? And what is was that Eckhart wasn't there. He didn't make it. Well, I was here, but didn't reach many of you, so Eckhart didn't make it to our appointed meeting. What was your mind saying? What did you verbally say? Comments to people around you? Or what did your mind comment about it? That's an interesting thing to look at. And accompanying the mental commentary, what was the emotion that went with it? And some of you, I'm sure, were already so present that there was no sense of upset, disappointment, anger, irritation, some kind of mental complaint. And perhaps there was just perhaps some of you just went into meditation, just became present and realized you don't need Eckhart to be present. Oh, wonderful. But if there was a reaction, then it's very useful retrospectively. Usually I don't like, as you know, don't like to go to the past, but from time to time can be helpful to look at a past reaction in which perhaps where you lost consciousness, you lost presence. And you don't beat yourself up. No, you just say, oh, that's interesting. There was the mind talking, and there was an emotion going with it. And I was completely that. I became that. It took me over. So whenever something goes wrong, big or small, you either react against it in one way or another. In other words, you are against what is, ultimately a dysfunctional state, which in extreme forms becomes insanity. Normal insanity, I mean. So the reaction against what is, or complete alignment with what is. And there you are. That means whenever something goes wrong, You either react or you go deeper into presence, deeper into yourself. You can notice that with little things. When little things go wrong, you go a little bit deeper to a place where you don't need the external to be this way or that way, because you already sense the fullness of life at this moment. You already sense yourself as consciousness, and nothing needs to be added to that. So sometimes it's only when things go wrong, quite often, it's only then, for many people who are not yet able to voluntarily enter presence, only then the possibility of going deeper opens up for them, or they become reactive. So another example, you're standing at a street corner, waiting to meet somebody for an appointment, and he or she doesn't turn up. So you stand there 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. What happens during that time inside you, in your mind, and what is your mind saying about it? And then, of course, the emotions that go usually are a reflection of what the mind is saying about it. It's an interesting thing to look at. What is it that your mind is commenting? And are you totally identified with what your mind is saying? Or do you realize, oh, these are just judgments that are coming up? And there's the possibility, the opportunity for letting go of all interpretations at that moment as you're standing there at the street corner, the person isn't turning up, letting go of all interpretations and just be there as the field of presence. So to do that, you go deeper within, where whatever happens on the surface of life doesn't determine any longer your state of consciousness, your happiness or unhappiness. And it's a wonderful sense of freedom, if you can be free of externals. And then at some point you call the person and say, where are you, or where were you? And then there may be a perfectly reasonable explanation why he or she couldn't come, or in which case all your mental commentaries, which were perhaps negative, are revealed as totally invalid, totally inaccurate. It was a total misinterpretation. That's possible. Or it could be that your mental commentaries were justified and that person says, oh, I completely forgot, I was doing something else. What's the reaction then in you? Am I of so little importance to this person that he or she forgot about our appointment? That's an interesting thought. And that thought can lead to many other thoughts. On a purely practical level, of course, if it happens several times and this person doesn't turn up, then you simply don't arrange to meet with this person anymore. And can you do this without any negativity around it? That's just what is. A very powerful state to immediately be with what is. That's what is. Instead of mentally saying it shouldn't be, or strengthen your ego by complaining about it. It's the same as saying it shouldn't be. Because the more you can complain about somebody or something, the stronger the inflated ego becomes. Huffing and puffing, I call that. So the more you can huff and puff about people and what they do, or this person and that, of course, the ego feels bigger and bigger. It's like a balloon. The more you huff and puff, the bigger you get. Can you live without huffing and puffing? Any complaining about others, what they do, what they fail to do, huffing and puffing. If you make a commentary in order to point something out so that something practical can be done about it, is a different matter. But huffing and puffing is not like that at all. It has nothing to do with changing the situation. What it changes is the way in which you deal with the situation, which becomes dysfunctional. So you can tell a person's presence by observing another person. If that person never complains about anybody, that's a good sign. Presence doesn't complain about anybody. It's still relatively rare that you meet people like that. But perhaps you're already on your way, or perhaps you're already at that state where you have relinquished all that futility of complaining about other people. An enormous step forward. So let's welcome the many ways in which things can go wrong in your life. Not wrong means, of course, with quotation marks, go wrong. Doesn't go wrong, it's the mental interpretation says it's going wrong. But we're using that conventional label, things going wrong, to point to something very important. Expectations are not being met. You're not getting what you want. Something happens that shouldn't be happening. Or something fails to happen that should be happening, like last Sunday. As you know, there are always two levels to this. I'm speaking and pointing out something that is helpful in your daily life. At the same time, there is an underlying presence here. So that's why we call it meditation. It's not a conventional meditation. But as I speak about becoming aware of a certain type of dysfunction, at the same time there's a presence there. So it works on two levels here. And that's also why the pauses are important when there are no words. So that next time there is something goes wrong, little or small, little or big, there's either already such presence that the reaction doesn't even arise, or there's a reaction and then there is the recognition immediately after, a second after, or a minute after, there's the recognition that there is a reaction, and there's a recognition that the mind is creating its story around the simplicity of what is. And there's the recognition that you don't need it, you're better off without it, you're more effective in what you do when you're free of that. So there's a choice of then being present instead of reactive. And then the reaction subsides and presence takes its place, arises, the reaction goes. And then that's an enormous thing when you suddenly realize in the very same situation, a minute ago you were upset and reactive and then recognized it. The recognition comes, of course, from heightened presence, and then you became the presence instead of the reaction. And then the reaction crumbles. And then in the very same situation, in that minute later, you're free of upset and you feel empowered. It means externals no longer control you. So, as I said, let's be grateful for all those occasions when things go wrong. There's always an opportunity for going deeper. And if it's something big that goes wrong, something truly huge, something big crumbles in your life, then you'll have to go even deeper, so the depth increases. When you just let go of a little upset, you go a little bit deeper. But when something big happens, some big loss in your life, then you have to go even deeper. It's always miraculous to suddenly discover that you can be free of externals. As far as your inner state is concerned.